into getting a Swift API interacting with a database. And so interacting with the database will allow for our data to persist after our connection is closed. And so whatever happens with the client stops, it resets, it gets thrown in the water, ocean, pond, whatever happens, our data is still going to remain in our database long after until we decide to delete it or the world explodes, right? I'll be using the Vapor3 framework and taking advantage of their ORM tool. ORM stands for Object Relational Mapping, and their tool is called Fluent. By using an ORM tool, it really allows us to abstract out our interactions with the database. And so instead of interacting directly with the database and writing database query strings, oh my god, select asterisk from table name, next line, no, we don't gotta do none of that. We're using Swift and we're doing things the Swifty way, the way that it should be done, okay? Oh, Kurt, okay, are you ready? Take a second, follow, subscribe, like, share, comment, all that fun, juicy stuff so that you can stay connected with me. All right, the video. All right, so we're going to continue on with our potato API. It's the same one that we started in the previous video. So if you haven't checked that video out, check it out and then come back here. So we're going to delete a few things that we don't need. We do not need the to-do controller. It was created when we created our project. We don't need it. We also do not need our to-do model. You especially want to delete that one since we will not be using a SQLite database. We'll be using MySQL. If you head over to our package.swift file, this is where we can go ahead and update our package to not use the SQLite database, but to use the MySQL database instead. So once you've updated the package, then you want to go ahead and also update the target to include the Fluent MySQL target as opposed to the previous SQLite database. All right. Okay. So if you head over to the configure file, then we're going to add a couple more modifications to take into consideration that we are using a MySQL database. And so at the top, we were previously importing the Fluent SQLite database. We want to go ahead and update that to include the Fluent MySQL database. And we're also going to want to update our providers as well. And so right now we're registering a SQLite provider. We want to update this to a MySQL provider. Now that we have our MySQL provider updated, we've registered it, we can go ahead and actually for now just comment out all of the SQLite database configuration, because at the moment our project is not aware of our Fluent MySQL dependency because we haven't rebuilt the project. So we're just going to comment that out for now, and we're also going to delete the to-do migration. Now let's update some stuff. Heading over to terminal, we can go ahead and first remove our previous build folder. And so that was the build folder that was created once we actually fetched all of our dependencies. And right now it is old, it's outdated. So we want to just go ahead and remove that folder completely. So that way we know that we're going to have a fresh build. We're also going to go ahead and remove our package.resolved file. That lets our project know which versions that we should actually pull. From there, we can go ahead and do our Vapor build, and it's going to go ahead and, since we've removed our build folder, it's going to trigger a fetching of the dependencies. And so now, since we added our Fluent MySQL dependency, now it's going to be included in that fetch, and once it's retrieved, we can go ahead and continue. So the fetching does take a while, not as long as this video makes it seem. Not as short as this video makes it seem. And so definitely feel free to pause the video and come back after the 5, 10, 15 minutes it takes to actually fetch. Cool. So now that we've fetched our dependencies, the project is building, everything's good so far, we can go ahead and generate our Xcode project from that. Vapor Xcode, and then the -y tells our terminal to automatically open the Xcode project for us. Now, hopping back over into Xcode, we can go back to our configure file, and now we can actually configure our database to our API. So deleting out the previously commented out code for the SQLite database, we can go ahead and configure our MySQL database. And so, excuse me. So we're going to start off by first adding our databases variable, and then this is going to hold all of our database configurations, and we're also going to create a new configuration, MySQL database configuration. The standard MySQL database config does have a lot of extra parameters that we don't need, so I'm just going to go ahead and manually type in what I need. So we have our host name is going to be our local host since we're running this locally. We have our username. I'm going to call this Vapor. And right now what we're doing is we're configuring our database, and this is going to be synonymous with the environment variables that we pass in. And so giving our configuration a password, for now I'm just giving it a standard password, and then also giving our database a name. And so since this is a potato API, I'm going to call this database potato. Awesome. Okay, so now that we've created our MySQL database config, we can go ahead and actually create our database, initialize it. And so we're going to create a constant of a MySQL database, and then we're going to pass in our configurations. And so now we've just initialized our MySQL database with the configurations, which has all of our environment variables that we're going to be passing in. And now we can go ahead and add that to our complete databases list. So now we're going to add that database, and we're going to add it as a MySQL database. You can add multiple databases, and it's really one of the advantages. You can really be flexible with the types of databases that you need for whatever model or migration you actually want to use it for. So we're going to register our database. Cool. And our database is essentially set up. One thing I did update, if you didn't notice, I updated our databases to be a variable, not a constant. I've gotten into this habit of default writing constants. It's a good habit. But if you need a variable, you want to update that to a variable. All right, cool. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new model. We want to actually create a table that uses MySQL, right? So let's do that. We're going to go ahead and create a new file, and I'm going to call this file potato. Because it's a potato API. We're going to continue on with the potato theme, right? So we have our new file. I'm going to just delete all of this stuff, the templated boilerplate code, and we're going to import Vapor. In addition, we're going to import our Fluent MySQL library. And so now we're going to go ahead. I'm going to initialize a class. I'm calling this potato. I am adding the final attribute so that it is not able to be subclassed. And I'm also conforming it to the codable protocol. So for our potato, I'm going to keep it real simple for now. Give it an ID. It's optional int. Give it a name. Standard, just a basic string. And if we go ahead, we initialize this. Do a standard initializer. Pass in a name, string. And then update the name property to the name that was passed in. Then we can go ahead at the bottom of this file and extend our potato class to include and conform to the other protocols that we need. So the first protocol that we're going to have our class conform to is going to be the MySQL model. And so this is going to allow us to add our model as a MySQL model in our MySQL table. We're also going to go ahead and extend it to the migration. This is going to allow us to add it to the migration. We're going to extend it for content. By extending it for content, this is going to allow us to pass in our potato as a JSON body whenever we're making or sending requests. And we're also going to conform it to the parameter. And so with the parameter, we'll be able to pass in a potato model as a parameter within our actual request. Now, if we hop back into our configure file, then we can go ahead and add our model and migration to the migrations configuration. And so we're adding our model. When you add a model, it automatically conforms. When you're adding a model, the model needs to conform to migration as well as a model. But you can also add just a migration. And we're setting our potato to be potato model to have a MySQL table. All right, so that is pretty much it for our configure file. Our Xcode project is set. Now we just want to do some stuff on our computer. So Docker and terminal. So this is assuming you already have Docker set. You go ahead, Docker run, and we're going to give it a name. First, we're going to give it a name. I'm going to call this potato API. This is the name for our actual container. And now we're going to set our environment variables. So the first environment variable, our user. Previously, we did list it as Vapor in our project. So we want to keep that equal here. So Vapor as well. We're setting our password. Password is what we set it in the Xcode project. And of course, you change it here, you change it there, right? And if you recall, the database was potato. Now, afterwards, we're going to set our port. 3306 is the default port for MySQL. -D allows it to be detached so it can run in the background. And we're specifying the MySQL version. So once we've done that, you hit enter. Now we've got Docker running, and you can do, you can have a post status to see whether our database is running. You can see that it's running right there 8 seconds ago. If you head over to my GitHub, I do have a repository, Cheese API. I've been making updates to it, but in my README, I do have a listed out instructions on if you are setting up Docker for the first time, how you can do that, and it goes like step by step. But if you're also interested in a video on that, I can do that as well. All right, cool. Hope this helps. Comment and share if it did. This is the end of the recording. Bye.